Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Wallingford Planning and Zoning Commission to order. It's our Monday, January 13th, 2025 meeting. We'd all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. And at this point in time, I'd like to introduce the members of the public, the members of the commission that are here this evening. To my immediate right is Jim Fitzsimmons, commission member. To Jim's right is Brian Revarve, who's a alternate on the commission. To my immediate left, J.P. Vanoit, who is the co-chair of this commission. And next to J.P. is Steve Allenson, who's our secretary. And next to Steve is David Parent, an alternate. And on the outside position is Joseph Sanders, also an alternate on the commission. To the lower table to my left is Cheryl Ann Tubby, our recording secretary, and next to Cheryl Ann is Kevin Pagini, our town planner, and I'm Jim Seichter. I'm the chair of this commission. Our next order of business is look for a motion to approve our minutes of our December 9th, 2024 meeting. First, if there's any commission members would have any additions, changes, corrections to the minutes. If there's none, I'd entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the minutes of December 9th, 2024.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstentions? Minutes are approved. Okay, at this point in time, we'll go to our public hearing, actually the one item on our agenda, which is a text amendment to Section 4.7 Downtown Apartment District, DA. Mr. Allenson, if you note any additional correspondence for the record, as this was a continuation of the application from December.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have a alternate proposal to Section 4.7. And then we have an overlay map of all of the districts that appear to be affected by the proposed alternate proposal. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Allenson. And Mr. Pagini, if you could just, I guess, go over very briefly what we had discussed at our December meeting. Again, we had the, let's call it the first proposal, if you would. And you've also offered us a second proposal for things we can consider with respect to looking to hopefully increase opportunities for for residential development in the form of apartments in certain areas of our town.
So the first proposal was to extend the downtown apartment overlay district, which currently allows multifamily dwelling units. It was an overlay district with particular geographic boundaries. That proposal would only change a small portion of parcels along South Cherry and on the corner of Ward Street. And it would give density bonuses for affordable housing, and it would keep the language for market rate essentially the same as what exists now. The alternate proposal is basically a complete 180, kind of a more aggressive proposal, I guess you could say, with allowing it in far more districts and allowing it by right. I included the House Bill number 5474 that was effective October 1st, 2024. I'll just give you probably the next month to read over that. It basically gives the town points for allowing multifamily units as of right. So I think if we move forward on this, I would like to include more of the term middle housing instead of multifamily potentially. So the state gives you points for allowing it as of right for market rate and as of right for affordable. I think I may ask Corporation Counsel for a better explanation of the full bill as we progress maybe to next month. But the alternate proposal would allow multifamily dwelling units and affordable housing developments in the R6, R11, R15, RF40. That would be by special permit, and on the second floors are above only. The I-40, I-20, CA12, CA40, CB12, and CB40 zoning districts. And as of right, there'll still be a minimum lot size of 25,000 square feet. You still have to comply with the bulk requirements, meaning that most of the bulk requirements for most of those zones, most of the height is capped at, say, 30 feet. And you still have to comply with the parking requirements. This all came out of conversations I had with housing group as well as other concerned citizens that maybe tried to take the fear factor out of allowing housing everywhere. Smaller sites, you may not be able to actually fit, multifamily dwelling units due to parking restrictions, due to height restrictions, whatnot. So that's why I got rid of the units per acre because of building code and minimum size requirements. There's only so many you'd probably be able to fit anyway due to bulk restrictions. So for affordable dwelling units, to give an incentive for those to developers, we would.
I guess, Mr. Bragini,
Yeah.
if I could just stop you there, because, again, we have two items that we can consider, and I guess the first thing I'd like to do is just get a consensus or a sense from the commission as far as what direction that we would kind of like to go with this. We have two proposals here. I know I spoke with Mr. Bragini this morning after I read through this, and I looked at what we initially were talking about at our first meeting was taking expanding the downtown housing district by maybe 9 or 8 properties and looking at that. And then after seeing his second proposal here, certainly to me that seems to be a much more aggressive proposal that could be a greater benefit to the town rather than just looking to make a modification, an amendment to our downtown apartment district, where again that has a very limited impact. But in looking at this, his second proposal, to me that became much more interesting to me. And I had a brief discussion with him, and I'd really like to just get the consensus of the commission just this evening how we would like to go with this, because I think there are some good opportunities. In my mind, I know Mr. Bragini was going over some of the items that were included in here. Clearly, I think tonight we wouldn't be in a position to make any type of a recommendation on this, because I think there's a lot of kind of unintended consequences that could perhaps come about that at least we want to look to see if that may or may not be the case. So again, from the commission standpoint, just this evening, where would we like to spend our time on talking more about, let's call it option one, which is just expanding the district, or looking at a much broader sense of providing some opportunities for additional development for apartments throughout the town. So I guess I just open up very quickly to commission members on that.
Process-wise, is there a potential path to do 2 steps here? I mean, we talked about last time, I think we thought about, step 1, and everyone's kind of seemed okay with that, and it's small impact. I agree with you a little bit that we'd want to look at something more comprehensive if there's value to it, but maybe there's a path to do that 2 steps. We could stay this and do some more research and investigation on our own of the proposed option 2, and perhaps talk it next time.
Sure. Yes, I'd leave it up to other commission members on how we'd like to go. Mr. Fitzsimmons.
I would agree, as Commissioner Rivard mentioned. I think it's a 2-step process. So I'm in favor of further expanding the downtown apartment overlay district first, and then get into the second option, after a little more thought. The one thing I'd say, and this is where the chairman and I disagree, I think about just last month when we approved the 4 units on Quimpiac Street, the Roz Gallagher project, without parking, so to speak. And I'm, to me, how could you approve that without parking? It works. It's downtown. So that's the piece. I know in here we talk about parking would be per 6.11. I think that's part of the challenge is someone being allowed to develop their parcel and provide the parking. And I think that's where, the chairman and I have talked about it over the years. We have quantity but not quality downtown parking. But since that time, we're getting better quality parking, whether it's municipal provide or others. So I'd hate for parking requirements to stop somebody from developing. So that's just the pitch I would make.
Okay. Other members? Mr. Allenson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also agree with the two-step process. I think that, at least since I've been on the commission, the downtown area for affordable housing and for housing units has been our primary goal of focus. And I think until we can find out how to make that work, to expand everywhere else seems to be throwing way too many darts at the board. So I would agree. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Sanders.
Just to say I concur. I think that in the first step in dealing with the downtown, we will learn quite a bit of things that will be useful for potentially other zones as well.
Okay. With that, I guess I would turn it over to commission members as far as comments they may have on the just the expansion. We had we discussed it last meeting. We had some comments, and I guess we would pick it up from there. Or if Mr. Bugini, if you'd like to again refresh everyone with respect to that.
Yeah, so it's essentially the same language for market rate. I haven't touched that. So that whole entire first 47AB, A and B, and then subsection 1, and then A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Those are all the same as they've been. The only thing I've added was the site plan approval for affordable dwelling units. That's a minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet. I don't know if there's discussion on maybe lowering that a little bit or keeping that the same. Then dwelling units per acre, not so sure if that's a huge consideration after speaking with some different citizens and developers, only because you can only make a unit so small with building code. And obviously they still have to comply with bulk area requirements. So, but then it gets rid of the density bonuses. So maybe we keep it in for now, and since it's kind of worked this way all along, but maybe we could think of maybe the bulk restriction easement language from the other proposal instead, if we do want to get rid of the units per acre, if we don't think that's something that really is necessary anymore. It is slightly confusing as we kind of heard from last month. It does get kind of confusing when you're doing 1 room, 2 rooms. It's a bit cumbersome for a developer to figure out. So I guess any suggestions on that, or potentially getting rid of it or leaving it? I believe I don't even know if minimum floor area anymore is, if 300 square feet is allowed. I'd have to check with the building department. It might be 400 square feet. So yeah, any discussion on maybe the units per acre, if you think it's a good idea, bad idea? I'm in favor of removing it, honestly, but and then maybe we can give developers a bonus to allow lesser bulk requirements potentially, but it would only affect roughly the 9 parcels,
9
basically,
parcels.
so.
Commission members, comments? Mr. Rivard.
Removal of those units per acre, that was requested by all the feedback, unanimous. It's benchmarked based on other areas that we model ourselves after. What's the recommendation in terms of pros and cons?
I think we require it in the other districts because the height is allowed. In this district, the height would only be 30 feet, I believe. So, you probably couldn't realistically fit that many units per acre anyway. Due to
And if that's the case, I'd concur with removing it.
Removing it. Anyone else?
And then if we get rid of,
Anyone else would like to comment on that as far as removing or not removing? Nothing?
and so if we remove units per acre, then we have to have probably some kind of incentive for developers to build affordable, I guess. So I don't know if that's a easing of the bulk restrictions language from.
Yeah, I think that, if you're removing it, then you'd have to provide some incentive.
Would everybody be in commission of the language that was proposed for the alternate proposal for that?
Won't you refer us back to that?
That was the, under the alternate proposal, it was under C number 2, bonuses for affordable developments are as followed. The commission may approve bulk requirements to be reduced or enlarged. That means just the height. That would be the only one that would be enlarged, essentially, by up to 20% as site conditions allow for affordable developments. And then further bulk requirement bonuses potentially if they exceed the 30% minimum requirement for affordable units.
Anyone have any comments or suggestions on that?
I have a question.
Sure.
So, if I could, through you, Mr. Chairman, to the town planner. So, bulk requirements. I'm trying to figure it out and also visualize. So, can we use a building like the the Kaplan building, which has Archie Moore's on the first floor and 3 or 4 stories above? Mm-hmm. Okay. We would not get another one of those in town because of our height restriction, correct?
Correct. In that area that you would be allowing it, it's a, let's see, I believe it's a CB40, so that's a 30-foot restriction. And then the I-40 is 40 feet, but only a tiny portion of that property is I-40, so. Then Judd Square is already there, so I don't know if that would be a huge difference, but.
Well, I guess if I could, I guess I'm getting hung up on the term the bulk requirements.
It's just a bulk table, so that's the scheduled.
Unfortunately, I don't have the table in front of me, so yeah, okay. Oh, that's what he's calling it, bulk, okay.
Yeah, so it's 51B and 51C. Essentially your
deals with
bulk standards, your setbacks.
With setbacks and.
height.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, all the
The height and
standards,
all of
I'm
that.
sorry, okay.
I'm used
So-
to calling them bulk standards, but maybe.
All right, so let's talk about a different, if I could, talk about a different building. The TD Bank building.
Yeah.
Someone buys it, tears it down, and wants to build something new under these regs.
Well, that's in the town center, so,
Oh, different.
yeah.
Yeah.
This just affects
Right now,
the,
right now, right now, this is just the downtown apartment district.
Yeah,
don't
it'd
even
just
say-
be, that would just be the Judd
understand.
Square property and the CB40 basically on the corner of Ward and South Cherry. So it's just those two on that map of proposed zoning. So it just, the overlay district would just go across the street, basically. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just, it's
Yeah.
really just a small,
It's really small. Okay. Yeah.
they're relatively small parcels. Not to say that something else couldn't be done with the existing parcels that are
Right.
in the downtown district, but those are essentially ones that are, were developed.
Yeah.
And then
Yes,
in
then
that,
what this could do is with the, could perhaps provide for some additional development on the former Judd property, correct?
correct. Yeah, or say if, you know, they want to expand
Yeah.
or something else. So, and also the train tracks already do not have a setback requirement. So easing of the bulk restrictions on the train track isn't really an issue, but yeah, there's no setbacks to the train track. But everything else it could benefit, especially if they want to build affordable. And we could see how that works and maybe look at other areas or come back to it maybe next month. But
Comments?
I'm good.
You're good? Yes, Mr. Allenson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question for our town planner, because I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. C2 bonus, if the build has affordable units that exceed the 30% minimum, it says that the commission may approve further bulk requirement bonuses for projects that exceed the 30% minimum requirement for affordable units as site conditions allow on a per application basis. Does that mean that we can agree to do whatever we would agree to do? Because A is a 20% reduction, and then B says if there's affordable, we can essentially do whatever we want. Wipe the table and write it however we want.
essentially, yeah, because you're giving a bonus to build more affordable. So, but I doubt you'll be wanting to get rid of setbacks by 100%. So,
I'm not going to argue with having more discretion, but that's a lot of discretion.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we can get rid of that if you don't think that's appropriate. But I've seen other communities use it for bonuses for affordable. So,
So my
maybe
weird
we could say up to, I don't know, a maximum or something.
so my weird reaction that I'm having right now is not so much for this overlay, but having that bonus expand to beyond what this overlay is where I start to say, wait a minute.
Yeah.
You know, and it's not fair to developers to say, hey, you can present the commission with this awesome opportunity for yourself, and if you can convince them, then maybe they'll give you what you want. It's not really setting a
There's no guardrails.
proper field for an
Yeah.
ask.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I'd like to think about that a little bit.
I guess from our standpoint, because 830G, you can come in, you can basically say, we don't have to comply with anything. So if we're going to go above and beyond that, you know, the commission can kind of decide what's acceptable, I guess. So kind of gives them an incentive to do more if they want. But yeah, maybe we should put a maximum cap on it or something. But
Either that or realistically, maybe, you know, come up with some sort of a tier where at, you know, at 30 to 35%, it's X percentage, and we tier it up.
Yeah.
And if somebody wants to make a development that's got more than 50%, then maybe we would
yeah,
be more flexible, but I think that we've really got to tier the give and take here. My fear is somebody coming through this whole process and then, you know, saying that we're being completely unreasonable and unfair because the regs seem to give this
A
blanket
lot of
opportunity.
latitude.
So
I think
if
I
you-
beat the dead horse. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think there's still some life in the horse. Don't worry about it.
yeah, so if you capped it at 40, if you capped it at, say, someone stops at 50%, you could cap the the requirement at 40%. So, might work. You could tier it from if they offer 35% affordable, it'd be 25% reduction, and then so on, 5% up to 50%. So, might work. 40% reduction.
Any,
really isn't
any
that
commission
much.
members have any further questions that they like to make? Because we do have members of the public are here, and I'd certainly be very interested to see what they may have, and I certainly appreciate their interest in coming out this evening. So, again, this is a public hearing. Members of the public, we'd certainly like to hear your comments. Please just raise your hand, people that would like to speak, and we'll start with this gentleman to the right.
Good evening. Rich Partisano, 303 Highland Avenue. Just for the record, I'd like to say that I'm a very strong advocate of affordable housing. And behind me sits some of the members of our ad hoc Wallingford working group that's been trying to tackle some of the issues dealing with affordable housing over the last couple of years. We've got a temporary name for ourselves, I guess. You know, I mean, you think after 2 years we'd have it nailed down, but we're still working on it. But for now, we'll call ourselves the Housing Working Group of Wallingford. As you know, in order to have a strong, vibrant, and growing community, you need to have a housing stock that serves the needs of the workforce economy, which includes teachers, first responders, healthcare professionals, auto mechanics, anything of that nature. I mean, basically, you're talking about the backbone, you know, everyday citizens. You know, but then they, along with other vulnerable elements of the population, such as senior citizens, have become housing stressed. It's becoming increasingly difficult for a young family to be able to make it in Wallingford. In fact, population trends for Wallingford for the year 2040 show a 1% decline, and those numbers are coming from SCROG. You know, they like to crunch numbers, and that's what they do for a living. And even though that doesn't seem like much, you know, what it's showing is what we're losing is your 30-something population, and that's really what you need for a vibrant community. You know, that group of people, you really can't afford to lose that. All right, we need to raise the affordable housing stock in our town to a minimum of 10%, which is required by the state. Currently, Wallingford's at 4.3%, so we have a ways to go. But just interesting fact, in case anybody's interested, what town is number 169 on the list? You know, at rock bottom? Warren, yeah, 0.08%. So, I mean, 4.3 is not great, but at least you're not a Warren.
At one point in time, I think we were like 5.7 point something, I believe, and then
I think
as
you
some
dropped.
of the as
We
some of
dropped
the
a bit.
units roll off, we drop down.
During the P&Z meeting in December, I just want to emphasize something that one of the commission members said, Joe Sanders. He made a very interesting observation, in which my opinion hits the nail on the head. We need to go beyond the minimum requirements allowed within the definition of the 830G statute. The hill we need to climb, I'm quoting, is the way he put it, and he's right. To get to where the town needs to be, doing the minimum is not enough. Aiming for only the minimum is like putting a hamster on a wheel. You're spinning around, spinning and spinning, but you're just not getting there. Okay, so you need to be creative. You know, this proposal that we're talking about here, sure, that's one way of doing it, but you got to look at a whole number of different things that can be done in order to get to that 10%. Last year, the P&Z Commission, as well as IWWC, spent a lot of time battling neighborhood groups on 830-G petitions, and I'm talking about Church Street, Durham Road. And those battles are still continuing. I happen to live in the Church Street neighborhood, so I was kind of involved in that, and when you have everybody in the neighborhood saying no, 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 and then you're there, you know, it's a tough position to be in. You know, the vibes I'm getting from my own neighborhood is, yeah, we support affordable housing, but not in our neighborhood. You know, well, the problem is if every neighborhood in that town holds that position, you know, yeah, we support it, but not in our neighborhood, then where the heck does it go? You know, so you know, town could use a bit of an education here. Our AH group fully supports the efforts being initiated by Kevin regarding AH by right and the downtown overlay zone extension. Every little bit helps. We also encourage looking at other sections of the town. And just a suggestion, which comes to my mind, the Tracy section of town. You know, it's like, I mean, you stand on a corner in Tracy and you look around and you just think, it's like, this could be more productive. You know? Again, that's my opinion. But, and when you look at the zoning maps, Tracy is zoned as a TR30. I've got no clue what a TR30 is. What else? We also like to acknowledge the effort being put in to the boathouse project near the Senior Citizen Center. You know, that can have a large impact in bringing up the town's AH percentage. We would also like to acknowledge during the December P&Z meeting, during the public comment section, Don Crouch, who's an EDC specialist with the EDC, mentioned that this overlay district is supported by that commission as well. And, you know, we thank him for that comment. There is a strong link between economic development and affordable housing. In conclusion, I'd just like to say that AH needs to be part, in my opinion, in our opinion, it needs to be part of the strategic plan of the town. And by strategic plan, I mean the POCD, Plan of Conservation and Development. You know, that last was published in 2016, and by state statutes, it needs to be updated every 10 years. It's 2025. You got 1 year to go.
We're aware of that, sir.
Okay.
In fact, this morning, Mr. Pagini, Mr. Crouch, and I met with the mayor to have some initial discussions as far as, you know, looking to update the plan of conservation and development and how we're going to handle that. I believe we have in June 2026 in order to have that plan completed. So if you are Mr. Pagini and the commission to some degree are really going to start you know, planning for that. So it's something that we're certainly very aware of.
Okay. Do you plan on taking input from the community in terms of ideas on how to proceed with that, you know, when it comes to affordable housing?
Excuse me, your question again, sir?
I'm saying, are you considering taking opinions from people like our affordable housing group and, you know, building up from the bottom up with the POCD?
Yeah, all of our meetings, whether the commission meetings, workshops, when we start discussing the plan of conservation and development, those are all public meetings. So anybody, everybody, anybody is certainly welcome to come to those meetings, listen to the discussion, and, you know, have the opportunity to make their comments. In fact, you know, we encourage that. I mean, there's only 8 members of the, you know, of the commission, and we have our own ideas, but there's, you know, 44,000 members of the, you know, the community, and it's important to hear from as many people as we possibly can, because, you know, I may have an idea on something, Mr. Fitzsimmons may have, other gentlemen on the commission may have, but again, is that are those the only positions or opinions that should be heard? Absolutely not.
Okay. Very good. Well, thank you very much for listening to me and for your time, and we appreciate you know, everything that you guys are doing.
Good enough. Thank you, sir. Other members who would like to talk? Yes. Oh. No, well. She should go first. You were slow in raising your hand.
Hi, I'm Judah Lopez, 49 Academy Street. I don't have prepared words because I really just, I'm here as a community member and as someone who's participated in listening conversations that have been happening, which I would really encourage you all, thank you, Jim, we met at one of them, to come to, because, 7 o'clock on a Monday night, I've got 3 kids, it's not that easy to get out the house, and sometimes your meetings go really, really long. And so, you're not going to hear from 44,000 people, it's just not going to happen, right? But there are opportunities to hear from a larger group of people when they're meeting at the library or the senior center or other places, and folks do have things to say. I'm here really just to share you a small piece of my own story with Wallingford. My family moved here in 2012, and we were able to find an apartment on Ward Street. In fact, what drew us to Wallingford was the Spanish community of Wallingford, because we said, what is that Spanish community of Wallingford doing in this small New England town? It was so exciting to see a place like Scow, and I've gotten very involved with them over the years that we've been here. Our family started to grow, and we needed to get out of our apartment. And there was no place for us to live in Wallingford. There was not any housing that we could afford. My husband was here finishing his PhD at Yale, and we decided to stay because Connecticut is a great central place for us to be for the work that he was doing. Thankfully, there was a family in Wallingford that owned a house on Academy Street, heard about our situation, and offered to rent us the house because they had taken a job out of town. They rented us the house at the same rate that we paid for our apartment on Ward Street, which was unheard of. You might call that affordable, but what I call it is just genuine good care for the community. And their number one reason for giving us that spot was because we're a family, and we're a family that was willing to live in that community. I will say that one of the members of that household actually was probably not in favor of some of the changes that had happened over the years, but we have been very much in favor of seeing more and more families come to the community. So we moved into that house, and then it came time for them to sell it. And again, we were in a position to wonder how this was going to affect our family. But again, these good neighbors of ours decided to sell us the house at a reasonable rate. They didn't price gouge us like they could have, and we were able to stay in that home. My grandmother was living in Manchester, Connecticut at the time and was needing more care and needing more supervision. My family wanted her to come to Wallingford. You know what I'm going to say. There was no place for her. So we converted a living room into a bedroom for a 90-year-old woman so that she could stay with us for as long as possible. And she did. But if we had had the ability to build out of our property, or certainly if there was any other opportunities for senior housing that she could have afforded, she worked as a secretary, my grandfather worked as a steel worker, and then an insurance salesman. They had a fixed income, but they had retirement, and they were hardworking people. She would have never, ever, ever wanted to be priced out of just an apartment. But that's the reality that our seniors are facing. And it's not always possible for families to bring in an elderly family member to live with them, because now, not only are you working and caregiving for your children, but you're also caregiving for a senior in your home. And so we really appreciate the conversation moving forward. We've been able to open a business here in town. We would love to invite more people and see our business grow as a family. We're not able to do that. And so this is something that I really do have strong concerns about. I also believe that there's a misconception about what it means to who is our neighbor. In most faith traditions, there is, the scriptures would say, whether across faith traditions, I should say, that we love our neighbor as ourselves. And when we talk about who our neighbor is, sometimes these conversations get really uncomfortable for me, because we start to talk about who we don't want. And I would just challenge us to ask ourselves, why is that? Who is that? Can you really name what that sort of person that you don't want to be your neighbor? Because what we do often at the Wallingford Library, where I facilitate community conversations, is we talk about what it means to care for people who are different than us. And we have a lot of folks who work very hard, full-time jobs, but at $15 an hour for a minimum wage position, I have a 20-year-old daughter. I don't expect her to move out anytime soon. It's not possible, because there isn't any affordable place for her to live in Wallingford, even though she works 2 jobs, which is essentially more than full-time. So please consider what it means to have neighbors that might be different than you, that might be if you look at yourselves, you might find a lot of similarities between yourselves, but that's not who Wallingford is. Wallingford has continued to grow, and it's a really beautiful place that can flourish if we really take these things seriously. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for your comments. Other members? Bob, I think you're jumping the gun here.
Hi, everybody. I know some of you up there. My name's Kristen Butts. I live at 30 Demi Road. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I was lucky enough to have been raised here in Wallingford. Moved back about 20 years ago with my husband to raise our children near my parents, our family. We purchased the home we still live in today, and we're grateful for the life we're building in this wonderful community. My story isn't unique. However, as many are aware, the American dream of homeownership is becoming increasingly unattainable, primarily due to a severe housing shortage. As a licensed realtor for almost 22 years, I'm in the position to see the impact this challenge is having on our Wallingford community. While the demand for housing is similar throughout Connecticut, I believe with a little creativity, we as neighbors, alongside our town government, can work together to increase the supply, especially affordable options, and for our senior citizens by addressing some of our zoning regulations. If more affordable housing can be made available for seniors, the opportunity to increase housing for the rest of the population becomes more realistic. I regularly hear from retired homeowners who'd like to downsize from their multi-level, sometimes larger homes due to the financial and physical burdens of maintaining them, but are unable to find a suitable independent living option here in town, as we're hearing. When the burden becomes too great, we see unintended multi-generational living. Typically, what I see is in their family's basement. I had 3 instances last year of folks living in an RV parked in the backyard, which are obvious zoning, health, and safety violations that we don't want to have, but the alternative was a car. From my perspective as a realtor, this is a problem. Obviously, many are simply looking for a smaller, nice, clean, safe place to live in Wallingford, but it doesn't currently exist for those who are not among the wealthier of our neighbors to live out their golden years. A quarter of our population is over 60 years old, which is almost 11,000 people. When we can create more supply, using the options we already have in place, such as the proposal with the downtown overlay zone, Wallingford's own affordable housing plan that was created in 2022, the goal can become a reality. Of course, it's not only our seniors, as we've been talking about. Folks of all ages are struggling to afford to stay in town on their own. It's one of the reasons I became involved in this growing group of residents and organizations whose goal is to build relationships and propose solutions to the housing challenges that we all face. Many creative minds are coming together from a variety of specialties in an organized way to make a real difference. By pooling our knowledge and resources to create more affordable housing options for our seniors, the housing supply in town could increase for everyone, and that is our goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other members of the public, please just raise your hand. Other individuals would like to speak.
Good evening, everyone. For the record, my name is Bob Wiedenman. I'm a builder in town. I live at 1443 Durham Road, and I'm also a member of this housing conversation group that we're talking about. I was invited to get involved in that about 1.5 years ago, and as I think everyone here knows, I'm pretty passionate about housing, especially affordable housing, maybe to my own detriment sometimes. So I just want you to know that first, I really appreciate you looking at this regulation. I think this is a great starting point for what we can do to improve the housing opportunities in town. On this specific issue, there's a couple things I want. Well, if I could start before I talk about this particular regulation, Jim, Mr. Reichter, you made a comment about the fact that our number of affordable units has gone down percentage-wise. I'm not positive of this, but I don't believe that we've actually taken any of the affordable units off the docket because they've not exceeded their 30 or 40 years. Early on, the units were 30-year deed restrictions under 830G. They're currently, with the current regulations, 40 years. I think what's happening is we're growing more market rate housing, so the percentages get offset a little bit. So we're just not building proportionally enough affordable housing right now.
But it also may be because is it government-backed mortgages? There's certain, certain types of financing.
Yeah, there are other units that be counted
the units
because
that
of,
are, yeah, kind of,
those may be falling off, and I don't have that
it's
information.
It's just not the 830G.
Yes.
There's other components that make that up.
Yes,
But
yes,
I think your point probably
you are
is
correct.
certainly well taken.
The other point I'd just like to make about affordable housing in general is, especially under 830G, we tend to focus on that 30% of affordable units as that being the only thing that's important in the whole conversation. And what I think is really even more important than that is the other 70% that get built at what I'm going to call moderately priced housing. More often than not, we're taking a property that would be very low density and end up with very expensive housing, very few houses, very expensive houses on that property. And when we go under an 830G program, we're making a trade-off. We're saying we will contribute 30% of our units to maintain them affordable, but in return, we get additional density typically to offset the cost to make that all work out. We don't typically sell those 70% at that same price that we would have if we were not under an 830G program. We build a whole bunch of units, typically 70% of them, at some moderate price. Now, they may not be as low as we'd all like, but they're much less expensive than they would be otherwise. So I just want to kind of clear up that kind of, and it may not even be the commission. I may be preaching to the choir here, but I think some people in the public think all we get is 30%, and in a small project you get 1, 2, 10 units. It's having no impact. Well, the impact is the whole project got approved, and we have a lot more units available at a more moderate price. So I'll get off my soapbox, but thank you for that. As far as this district, the couple things that I'd like to see you at least consider, and I don't know if you guys are open to this or not, would be expanding the district beyond what is proposed right now. When we talked to Kevin about this initially last week, and I was part of that group that met with him, we talked about the fact that we're doing I think you said 9 parcels. It's a fairly small expansion of the zone. And in my mind, this zone would be suitable probably from the Quinnipiac River to at least Orchard Street, if not Whittlesey, and probably from John Street north to, I forget the intersection, McDonald's. I mean, it could be that broad an area that, in my mind, would all be suitable for this type of development. And it doesn't mean that every single property in that area is going to all of a sudden become multifamily and the maximum height and the maximum build-out, but it gives a lot more flexibility to finding parcels that make sense, properties that are in disrepair, underutilized properties, things of that nature, which would really encourage the redevelopment of that area, walkable to the train station, walkable to downtown. I think that would all make sense. Now, that may be far-reaching when I talk about that large an area. And the reason that when we were talking with Kevin, and the light went off on all of us when we started looking at this and said, when we start taking a zoning map and drawing lines around it, every one of us is going to draw a different set of lines. And that's how we sort of got on the subject of maybe an overlay zone is a more appropriate long-term solution to that problem. And I understand why you'd like to move something rather than nothing, and we could get hung up on it's going too far and now nothing happens at all. So I'd much rather, I kind of agree with you that let's get something done right now. So that's great. But I would ask you to just at least consider expanding beyond those 9 properties.
But I guess, Mr. Whedon, I guess my question would be is the properties that you've kind of identified or would like to see expanded to, I would assume, looking at the alternate proposal, we have the R6, R11, R15, RF40, I-40, I-20, CA12, CA40, CV12, CV40 zone. I suspect pretty much all of those zones, or all of those zones fall into the area that talking about. Is that fair to say?
I think most of those, although some of those zones extend fairly close to East Side Market, all the way up Center Street. They probably extend on North Main Street, maybe South Main Street. I don't know the exact borders of every zone. I'm pretty
Yeah,
good,
no,
but I don't know them all.
No, but looking, I guess, just looking at the map that Mr. Bergini
Right.
provided to us with respect to this, his alternate proposal, it seemed that, again, the areas that you're talking about pretty much are included, what he's looking at, or what he considers, alternate, the alternate proposal.
Yeah, and as I said, I may be going too far in the extreme saying of those particular boundaries, but there may be some other boundaries, and we could just do a circle, say from the train station or from, if you wanted to say, the intersection of Route 5 and Center Street and say a half-mile radius, pick a number, 2,000 feet, 4,000 feet, whatever the number is, we could just do a radius. But then you start running into, do properties are partially in the zone and not in the zone and that sort of thing. So it can get overly complicated. So anyway, that's how that discussion came about, that we were talking about maybe an overlay zone of some sort as a long-term solution. The other area that I'd like you to consider is reducing the minimum lot size in order to be allowed to use this regulation. It's currently 25,000 square feet. This proposal brings it down to 15,000 square feet. I think if you look at a zoning map, and Kevin and I talked a little bit about this, and neither of us knew the exact number, but there's still a tremendous amount of properties that would not be allowed to utilize this, even with a minimum of 15,000 square feet. There are a lot of lots, like in an R6 zone, most of those lots are 7,000 square feet, for instance. So none of those R6 lots that are probably the closest to the core downtown would not be able to utilize this regulation as is proposed, this revised regulation as proposed. So I would suggest perhaps, and again, it's just a number, 10,000 square feet being at a minimum. Worst case, you have to combine two R6 lots, and now I've got enough land to come in and bring an application before you folks. So that would just be another consideration I would ask you to at least think about. The last thing I'll leave you with is just, and you guys have already mentioned it, the parking requirements. We've talked years that maybe our parking requirements are a little bit too strict, too many parking spaces. And Kevin and I talked again about this at our meeting, is that I've got a daughter who knows the marketing of apartments, and she knows that we have potential tenants that ask us what the parking requirement or allowances are on a property before they even commit to an apartment. So the market is sort of going to dictate the parking. If I have a two-bedroom unit, I'll honestly, regardless of your regulation, I'm going to have a minimum of 2 parking spaces for a two-bedroom apartment, or I'm not interested in it, because I know that in order for someone to afford one of the apartments that I build with 2 bedrooms, it's going to take 2 incomes, and that means 2 people, probably 2 cars. Now, if I do a 1-bedroom apartment, I can probably go down to a parking space or a parking space and a quarter, something like that, and make it work. So in my mind, the market's going to dictate how much parking is necessary, more so than what the regulation says. You could tell me I can buy parking, in the parking lot that the town just built on the old Brothers site or something like that. But if that's more than 150 feet from their front door, they're not going to rent my apartment because of that reason. And I'm speaking, and I've spoken to Roz Gallagher about this particular thing since they got their approval, that would be a concern for mine, the way that was approved. I know it meets the regulations, and she got the density that she'd wanted, but it's not the way I would have done it for that exact reason. So I would just ask you to at least think, and I know it's not part of this proposed regulation change, but that we look at the parking regulation to soften it up, because that's going to dictate whether a project is viable or not, as we can fit the parking and the buildings within the setbacks that are required. So I'll leave you at that unless there's any questions.
No, I think with parking, that's always, I think that's always going to be an issue. I know when we're looking at, some of the, parking requirements that we may have, if you're looking at the downtown area, say like with the Gallagher property, you have the Brothers lot or the old Brothers lot, whatever we want to call it, that's there, so that's available. You look at in the center of town, there's parking that's available. The thing I think, though, we have to be concerned about is to make sure there is, in some ways, adequate parking, because if you go down, just go down Ward Street as you head toward Wallace Park, whatever, there's, quite a few apartment, two-story, rather two-family, three-family, houses there. And you're going to see a lot of cars parked on the front lawn. And so that, becomes, I think that's something you need to be conscious about. In the center of town, that's one issue because you do have parking that's available. There's parking lots there. But when you start getting and you start moving away from the center of town where there's not parking lots, that's when I think you can't be, at least in my mind, that cavalier to say, well, people will find where they're going to park because you may find them parking up on, parking up on the front lawn. In some cases, you'll see the cars are parked across the sidewalk too. Again, it's, people need a place to park, and as you mentioned, if you have a two-bedroom apartment, you're going to have at least two cars in many cases. So I think we just have to keep that in mind when we're talking about parking. And then, as far as the comments that people made about affordable housing, I mean, I have to say, I think this commission has been, very supportive of affordable housing as far as the projects that have come here. In fact, I think the majority, if not all, of the commission members are concerned that we just don't see enough of it. We just don't see the applications coming in. I know there's several individuals that are interested, I think, in some affordable housing projects that, Mr. Pagini had mentioned to me. And I mean, those conversations seem to have been going on for, I don't know, a year and a half with, certain parcels that people are, interested in. So again, I come back, I think the commission has been very supportive of that and clearly would like to see, more applications coming in for that. We had, certainly as you're aware, just across from what I call the old Rubens building at the corner of Route 5 and Center Street, just on the other side. That's in our incentive housing zone. We have provided through the incentive housing a regulation, certainly bonuses for people to develop that property. That property was sold. The gentleman came in with a plan, but it's not affordable housing. He didn't want to, for whatever reason. It made more sense for him to construct market rate. So, we had that regulation out there, but it just hasn't been used. And to me, and I think other commission members, become somewhat frustrated by that we just don't see the activity. And I'm not sure how we get around that, because I clearly don't think that the commission takes a negative view toward, affordable housing. I certainly will understand, there's members of the public that, that may have issues with that, and it certainly does come back to, gee, I don't want to see that perhaps in my neighborhood. But again, I just feel the commission has been very, very supportive of getting and trying to get some affordable housing, developed in this town. But there's certain things we have control of, and other things well beyond our control.
Right. You can't force people to bring applications in.
Exactly.
You can only act on what comes before you.
Yeah,
I get that. And
exactly.
I would agree with you. I mean, if I came across as, I didn't mean to suggest that you guys
Right.
are not supportive of affordable housing. I was really talking to the public and just in general, that conversation. And I'm a proponent of housing in general, whether it's affordable, market rate, moderate, workforce housing. I mean, we need all levels. There's just not enough housing. We're short 90,000 units in the state of Connecticut, and we're only building 5,000 units a year. So you think about this thing, if we doubled our production for the next 20 years and we didn't have any increase in need, we would meet that. And I can tell you the industry could not build that many housing units in the next 20, it won't happen. So we need housing from every direction. And I do a lot of lobbying up at the state capitol, and I'm talking to legislators about these same issues. And this is not a Wallingford problem. This is a state problem that's not going to go away anytime soon. So thank you for your time time, and I appreciate you guys talking about this particular application. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public who would like to speak? Seeing none, I guess I bring it back to the commission to see how we would like to go forward on this. You know, there's a desire to look at expanding the downtown apartment district. To take that as a first step, there's been various suggestions being proposed as far as how to do that. As far as changes that people may like to see, you know, there was the discussion from Mr. Wiederman, you know, to reduce the size of the lots from the 15,000 to 10,000. Some other discussions concerning the bulk requirements and all of that. I guess looking for some comments, some direction. At this point in time, I don't believe we'd be in a position to approve anything this evening. But what I'd like to see is, you know, some direction given to Mr. Pagini to put together, you know, for us for the next meeting, something that's, you know, very firm as far as what the commission would, you know, would like to consider and possibly approve. So I guess I would ask for some suggestions or comments to Mr. Pagini as far as what people would like to see in expanding the downtown apartment district.
I think we should potentially work on the current one and then potentially bring the alternate as a separate application next month.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. I think as far as the alternate, much like we did, you know, we discussed this morning, as far as the second one, there's a lot of property. There's a lot of properties that are involved with that, and I think we want to look at the properties just to get a better feel for what they are, what impact it would have, wouldn't have, and again, I kind of come back to, you know, the unintended consequences too. That we're approving something, and then all of a sudden, we may get an application that kind of falls well beyond what we were thinking of. So, at least in my mind, I'd like to be able to take action on the downtown apartment district next month. But I'd like to see also on your second proposal, your alternate proposal, I'd like to see some additional, you know, comments on that and some thought put into that, but also, you know, give you and perhaps Mr. Crouch, whatever, a little bit more time to look at those properties. Also, to give some consideration. You know, Mr. Wiederman had mentioned, you know, perhaps expanding it outside of what we have here to take a look at that. That seem reasonable?
Yeah, I think this expansion, the alternate proposal would expand basically all of the downtown apartment overlay and beyond.
Yeah, exactly. I think it takes up, looking at the map that you provided to us on that, you know, there are, certainly there's some parcels that go, you know, outside of that area, which is fine.
So I think we can still leave the downtown apartment overlay district, but just, you know, maybe tweak that language and then come back with a separate application for.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And would you be in agreement with a tiered bulk requirement up to 40%? So if you provide 35% affordable, you get a reduction and enlargement of 25%. And
Well, I guess that's something to, at least for me, I'm a little thick at times until I see, my wife will tell you that. But until I see something on paper, because sometimes I'm a little bit slow. I would like you to certainly, you know, include that in there, with the understanding that it could increase, it could decrease, but it gives us something to, you know, something to consider and you know, to just to think about and what the implications may or may not be. Because, you know, clearly whatever, you know, whatever proposed, we can certainly, you know, we can certainly change or make some, you know, amendment to. But to have something on paper that we can further discuss that reflects, the items that we, that we talked about this evening.
And would you want to also look at decreasing the lot size for the special permit for market rate, or leave that alone, or I don't know what we're thinking on that one, but that one's currently at 25,000 square feet, and I doubt that there are very many lots, unless you combine 4 of them, that it would meet that. So might be something to think about. potentially.
Yeah, again, that's something, I guess I would look to you for some suggestions as far as, because I think you're much more familiar with the various parcels than, what the commission may be, or at least certainly than what I am. So I would look at what your suggestion, you're obviously the town planner, look at your suggestions, and then that's something that we can discuss, whatever's proposed or whatever you give to us next month is subject to discussion. And I think as far as trying to iron something out this evening, it's much better to give us a hard copy, if you would, for next month. We can look at it, and even perhaps if we have questions before that, have some of those questions addressed, or at least have a better idea of what our questions, what may be, and just what the implications of certain things may be.
And just to answer the gentleman's question from before, the Tracy zone is basically a commercial zone and kind of a mixed industrial that it does allow multifamily development. It allows basically anything industrial, commercial. It's just kind of its own zone. So, and also for the POCD, I think I may be looking to put just a survey or a form online and just kind of leave it up for next year and a half, just so anybody wants to comment, give me suggestions, it can go directly from the website, hopefully. So that's what I'm thinking about. Just
Yeah, I know. That was one of the things I think briefly discussed this morning with the mayor, and I think that's a good idea in order to get as much public comment as we can. Any other commission members or any commission members have any questions, any directions that they'd like to give to Mr. Pagini on this? Mr. Allenson.
Just one real quick, Mr. Chairman, because you and I have talked about this. There's that 30 to 40 year deed restriction that's on there where affordable housing rolls off. And we just heard statistics about percentage of affordable housing dropping over the years, and that it could be because of certain housing that was affordable at one point or was under a program at one point rolling back. I don't know how we do it, or if we can do it, because I don't think there's a way to do it. But if there's any way with a conversation, maybe to Corporation Counsel, since you're speaking to her already, to find possibly some creative way to put that in there, and then maybe we could come up with some incentives that would incentivize some permanent affordable units. I think that that's an absolute need, because what's fixed now in 40 years is going to be broken.
That's been one of my, from the first time we had when Ed Laughlin made his first presentation on affordable housing quite some time ago, I threw out it should be in perpetuity, and I got slapped back by our corporate counsel and everyone else. Because again, I've said this many times, I sound like a broken record. Today we could be at 10%. We have all the units, and 2 years after that, we could be down to 8%. And in order to stay at the 10%, you'd have to keep building and building and building more affordable units, and they start rolling off, and you have to replace them. It just never. I didn't understand the logic to it. I know. Who was the attorney that represented one of our applicants on affordable housing? Tim Hollister.
Hollister.
I know he went to explain why that 40-year restriction is in there, and it all dealt with bank financing and all of that. I listened to him again. I didn't quite understand it. It just didn't really make a great deal of sense to me, but that's the legislature. That's what they came up with. and I know at one of the more recent affordable housing projects that came before us, when I talked with our corporate counsel again to say, oh, can we increase it to 50? Can we increase it to something? And she said, you can ask, but that's all you can do. You have no power with that. But, the idea of perhaps providing some additional benefit may be something that we can, that we could consider.
I mean, my fear, Mr. Chairman, is that at some point the option is open space, wetlands, or nothing.
Yeah.
And we're gonna run out.
Exactly. Yeah, that's, again, I if you look in the long run, if it continues, it's going to be well beyond my lifetime. But yeah, you could very well run into that situation where you've built a lot of affordable housing, it rolls off, and now what do you have?
I think it's fair to say that none of us, including the members of the public that are here tonight, will have to directly worry about it. But still, our job is for the future, not
Well,
for
exactly,
now.
because the need for housing, whether it's market rate housing, below market rate housing, affordable housing, it's there, it's going to be there, and it's going to get bigger. Anyway. All right, I believe on this one, Mr. Piccini, you have your direction for next month?
Yes.
Okay. So at this point in time, I'd entertain a motion to continue this, this public hearing to next month.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we continue our public hearing for application 904-24, text amendment, section 4.7, downtown apartment DA district.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All approved?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions? Okay, we going to continue this to next month. With that, Mr. Piccini, if you would take the wheel and take us through the rest of our meeting, please.
Any questions on administrative approvals?
Anyone with any questions on that? I don't see any, so if you'd continue, please.
Any questions on ZBA December decisions?
Hearing none?
And any questions on the notice for January 21st for ZBA?
Anyone?
And I will be getting the annual report for next month.
Okay. So with that, I think it brings us to the end of our meeting. So I would entertain unless anyone has any other comments to make, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we close the Wallingford Planning and Zoning Commission for Monday, January 13th, 2025.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Fitzsimmons. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We're adjourned. And also, the members of the public, thank you very much for coming out this evening. We certainly appreciate your comments. And as far as the young lady out there in the center, I tell you, that was a very, very interesting and heartwarming comments that you made. And it's nice to see that we have people, in the community that are very sensitive to the needs of other members of the community. So thank you very much for that.